Hello and welcome to another in the 10-minute tip series. This one is titled Conflict Resolution Tips for Credit and Collections. My name is Michael Dennis and I'll be your presenter today. Let's begin with an introduction. Unresolved conflicts in credit and collections can result in lower productivity. They can result in higher costs and in lower levels of customer satisfaction. The goal of this program is to talk about effective workplace conflict resolution strategies, and that will reduce harmful effects of workplace conflicts in credit and collections. The ability to resolve workplace-related conflicts effectively can empower and inspire individuals. Conversely, if you are unable to effectively manage conflict, the results will be demoralized and demotivated individuals working for you. Conflicts are inevitable in credit and collections. They're an inevitable byproduct of the type of work that we do, especially the work that relates to collections, as well as the work that relates to deciding and assigning credit limits to customers, both increasing credit limits and reducing credit limits. And oh, by the way, let's just throw in as the icing on the cake, conflict that results in decisions to place accounts on credit hold. In my perspective, certain conflicts can ultimately be constructive. Let me give you an illustration. Let's assume that there's a conflict with a salesperson over a negative credit decision involving a new account that has a requested $100,000 credit limit. If that conflict results in a refining of the decision-making process, that's constructive. If the conflict forces us to consider other options and alternatives to rejecting the $100,000 credit limit, that's constructive. To the extent that the salesperson gets a full and fair hearing in connection with the negative decision and understands the rationale, the justification, the decision-making process that resulted in the negative credit decision, that is a constructive outcome of a conflict. Unfortunately, most managers receive little or no training in conflict resolution, and as a consequence, some managers ignore problems until they can no longer be ignored. Let's talk about some of the sources of workplace conflict. Poor communication and miscommunication are sources of workplace conflict. For example, if you're not responding to calls and inquiries from the sales department in a timely manner, that is poor communication, and that is a potential source of conflict. Inadequate training is a source of conflict to the extent that inadequate training results in improper decision-making, incorrect decisions if you prefer. Another source of workplace conflict in credit and collections is favoritism or discrimination. To all supervisors that are listening, your employees are watching. Your employees are attuned. They are carefully studying your interactions with coworkers to try to determine the pecking order, to try to determine whether or not they are in the in-group or they are in the out-group. To the extent that you demonstrate favoritism to an employee, please recognize that your other employees are fully aware of your apparent favoritism. They're watching, they're aware. Excessive workloads are a source of workplace conflict. When workloads are excessive, things drop through, things drop out. And the things that drop out are potentially problematic, and they are the source of the conflict oftentimes. Inadequate resources for the entire department are a source of workplace conflict because, again, when you have inadequate resources, you miss things. Things drop out. And as a consequence, people are disappointed. People are frustrated. Internal customers and external customers aren't happy, and that is, again, a source of conflict. Unrealistic goals and expectations are a source of conflict. Let me illustrate. Unrealistic goals and expectations that are crammed down by senior management on the credit department are a source of conflict. Unrealistic goals and expectations that are established by the credit manager for the members of the credit department team are a source of stress and a source of conflict. How to de-escalate, how to avoid conflicts, and how to de-escalate. Number one, discuss disagreements in private. If you're having a disagreement with a coworker, take it offline. Take it to a conference room. Don't have it in the hallway. Don't have it in the workspace where everybody's listening and everybody's overhearing, because that is not de-escalating. Pick your battles. Not everything is worth escalating. Not everything is worth a conflict. Remain calm. And here's the key point. The only emotions you can control are yours. And if you are able to control your emotions, you're in a much better place to de-escalate a disagreement and avoid a conflict. Try to address issues proactively, by which I mean address issues before they become problems and address problems before they become a crisis. And along the same lines, please be sure to address the specific issue and not the symptom of the problem. How to resolve conflicts? Don't ignore them. Don't mandate a solution. If you're a boss, if you're a leader, if you're a department head, please don't be Solomon. Don't split the baby in half. Try to reach agreement through discussion and collaboration. Look for win-win outcomes. And of course, consider brainstorming to get to the outcome that is in fact a win-win for both parties. Another option in connection with workplace-related conflicts is mediation by a neutral third party. For example, you could, in theory, go to the Human Resources Department and ask them to mediate a conflict if they were willing to assume that role. Another way of resolving conflicts is when you're wrong, admit it. If you made a mistake, if new information comes to light, if you missed something, please don't double down on the wrong decision. Go ahead and admit you're wrong. I know it's human nature to try not to do that, to not want to admit that we're wrong, but we are. And we are from time to time. And when we are, it can be a minor miss and it can be a glaring mistake. And in either scenario, if you're wrong, please admit it and let's move forward. Try to remember to respect the individual even if you disagree with their position. Let's go back to that example I gave earlier where it's a credit application, it's a new account, they want $100,000, and you find that after your review of the application and gathering and analyzing the information that the customer qualifies for, let's just say, $30,000. They deserve to be assigned a $30,000 credit limit. Okay. Well, not surprisingly, the salesperson may disagree with that. It's important in the context of that disagreement that you respect the individual. And more specifically, disagreement on the part of the sales department is exactly what they are expected to do. It's exactly what they're supposed to do. It's exactly what they're paid to do. Salespeople are paid to generate sales, to increase sales, to bring in new accounts, to encourage customers to issue big purchase orders. And when the sales department presents that opportunity and the credit department says no thank you, or no I don't think so, or can't do it, it's not surprising that they are going to potentially have a disagreement with that opinion that the credit department has. It's up to us to explain the rationale for the position. It's not a debate. You don't need to convince them that you're right. You need to take enough time to explain to them the rationale for the decision-making process. However, if that doesn't work, there is another alternative, and it's what I call a formal conflict resolution process. It's an 8-step process. Number 1, we define the problem. Number 2, we generate a list of solutions. 3, we evaluate each of those potential solutions. 4, we determine which course of action is the best solution for the problem, the one that will resolve the conflict the most effectively, perhaps the fastest, resolve the problem the quickest. We decide how to implement the solution. We implement the solution. We measure and monitor the outcome of the fix that we put in, that we assumed would solve the problem. And then we decide at a later date if additional action is necessary because the problem wasn't fixed or it wasn't completely fixed. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your interest and your attention. I certainly hope that you found this presentation to be useful.